I've been watching the financial headlines for years. Gold soaring, Bitcoin smashing records, property markets booming. Everyone's obsessed with these flashy assets. Every morning the news floods with stories about hedge funds piling into gold at $4,000 an ounce, Bitcoin flirting with six figures, and billionaires snapping up penthouses in London or country estates in the Cotswolds. It's the same story, repeated ad nauseum. But here's the kicker. While the headlines scream about gold and crypto, the real heavy hitters, those ultra-wealthy players, have already moved on. They're quietly scooping up three types of assets barely anyone talks about. Obscure, almost boring, but essential. Assets that will outshine gold when the financial system finally cracks and the dust settles. You won't hear about these assets on breakfast TV or see them trending on Twitter. No flashy press releases or celebrity interviews. Just relentless, silent accumulation through layers of shell companies and private deals designed to keep ownership hidden. Let me pull back the curtain and show you what these three secrets are, why billionaires are snapping them up in 2025, and, most importantly, how you can get a piece of the pie without needing a private jet or a bank account with more zeros than you can count. The first asset sounds dull, almost laughably so. But trust me, boring is exactly why it's valuable. It's farmland. Not just any farmland, but very specific patches in very specific places. And the person who's been buying more of this than anyone else in the UK, you've definitely heard of him, Sir William Gates. Yes, that William Gates. By 2025, he owns around 275,000 acres of farmland scattered across England, Wales, and parts of Scotland. That's roughly the size of Greater London. Just one man's private empire of soil. Through his investment company, Cascade Capital, he's been quietly acquiring prime farmland since 2013, methodically building a portfolio that most people completely overlook. But here's where it gets interesting. Gates isn't blindly buying any old field. He's targeting land with three unbeatable qualities. Take his largest holdings in the fertile fenlands of Cambridgeshire. 69,000 acres spread across several towns. This isn't just any patch of earth, it's some of the richest soil in the country, shaped over millennia by river floods. The kind of soil you can't just make overnight with a bit of compost. Then there's water, lots of it. This land sits atop massive underground aquifers and lies close to the river Great Ouse, ensuring irrigation even when the skies refuse to cooperate. When droughts hit elsewhere, these fields stay green. Finally, the climate here lets farmers get 2 full crop cycles each year, a rare advantage in the UK's temperate but often unpredictable weather. Gates's second biggest holding is down in Norfolk, about 48,000 acres of prime wheat and barley land right next to the River Wensum. Water access again, plus a proven track record of high yields. His third major stash is in the West Midlands near the Severn River Basin, where the aquifers are deep and recharging steadily. This is no accident. Each plot ticks the same boxes: superior soil, guaranteed water, and a climate that supports robust, repeat harvests. He's not farming the land himself, at least not directly. He's buying the potential to control food production when the world's farming systems start to wobble under climate strain and supply chain chaos. And he's still buying. Just this past spring, his firm shelled out over $100 million for 8,800 acres in Herefordshire's Golden Valley, paying nearly 4 times the average price per acre. Why the premium? The land comes with mineral and water rights that guarantee access to precious resources, plus state-of-the-art irrigation already in place. It's like buying a luxury penthouse with underground parking and a butler. Which leads me to the second asset billionaires are quietly collecting: water rights. Not the water itself, mind you, but the legal permissions to extract and use it. In much of England and Wales, owning land doesn't automatically grant you the right to pump water. Water rights are a separate legal beast, often dating back centuries, and they're becoming more valuable than ever. Think about it. As climate change tightens the taps and droughts become more frequent, water rights are the ultimate power play. Whoever controls the water controls the future. And trust me, the ultra-rich have known this for decades. Take the story of John Pickering, a Texan-born oil magnate who moved his empire to the UK in the late 90s. He didn't buy his Norfolk farmland for the crops. He bought it for the water beneath, the rights to pull millions of gallons from ancient underground aquifers. In 2011, he sold a chunk of those rights to several towns across East Anglia for a cool $80 million. He didn't sell land or water, just the legal right to use the water. That's like selling the keys to a gold mine without giving away the mine itself. Pickering still controls the majority of those rights, now valued north of $400 million. Meanwhile, firms like Water Asset Management in London have snapped up thousands of acres along the River Thames, focusing solely on the water rights attached to the land, and they're making a killing. Even the Church of England has jumped in, buying vast tracts in Shropshire and Herefordshire, outbidding Gates himself for prime land with senior water rights. Not for farming, but for control. And there's more. Companies like Crown Thames Water Resources, backed by Wall Street money, have been quietly trying to amass water rights across the Thames Basin, aiming to lease or sell them to developers desperate for supply. Public backlash stalled their big moves, but they're still buying quietly in smaller deals. The message is clear. In 2030, the person holding water rights will be richer than the one holding oil wells. Finally, the third asset billionaires are piling into sounds downright bizarre if you're not in the know. Catastrophe bonds, or cat bonds for short. These financial instruments are a kind of bet on disasters, hurricanes, floods, wildfires. They're issued by insurance companies to share the risk of massive claims with investors. Here's how it works. Imagine an insurer covering homes in Cornwall from storms. Instead of just buying traditional reinsurance, which is costly and limited, they issue cat bonds. Investors buy these bonds, and their money sits safe in government bonds. In return, the insurer pays them a juicy premium, sometimes double what normal bonds yield. If no disaster strikes, investors keep their money plus the premium. If a hurricane slams Cornwall and causes billions in damage, investors lose their principal to cover claims. Sounds risky, right? But billionaires, hedge funds, and massive pension funds love them, because these bonds aren't tied to the stock market or economy. They're tied to nature's whims. When stocks tank, cat bonds often hold steady or even rise. In 2024, cat bonds returned a whopping 17.4%, beating the FTSE 100 and traditional bonds by a mile. The market's growing fast, diversifying beyond UK storms to cover earthquake risks in Japan, wildfires in Australia, floods in Europe, and even pandemic mortality. Major insurers like Aviva and Direct Line now issue cat bonds directly, making them mainstream insurance infrastructure. So, what's the connection between these three assets? Farmland with water, water rights, and cat bonds. They're all scarce, essential, inflation-proof, and disaster-resistant. You can't make more prime farmland overnight. Water rights were handed out centuries ago and can't be created anew. Disasters are fixed by geography and climate. They're essential. Food, water, and disaster protection aren't optional luxuries. Inflation-proof, when currencies lose value, food prices rise, water rights get scarcer, and cat bond yields adjust with inflation. And disaster-resistant, farmland survives crashes, water rights grow more valuable during droughts, and cat bonds are designed to withstand economic turmoil. Billionaires aren't chasing quick profits. They're safeguarding wealth for the coming decades, preparing for a world where currencies wobble, food is scarce, water expensive, and markets volatile. Now I know what you're thinking. How do you get in on this without a billionaire's bankroll? You can't just buy 69,000 acres in Cambridgeshire or outbid Gates in Herefordshire. Water rights don't trade on the stock exchange, and catastrophe bonds often require millions to access directly. But there are ways. Farmland REITs like Farmland Partners and Gladstone Land offer shares for a few pounds each, giving exposure to agricultural income. Platforms like AcreTrader let you invest in fractional shares of farms with as little as $10,000. Water utilities and infrastructure companies provide indirect exposure to water scarcity trends, and mutual funds like the Stone Ridge High Yield Reinsurance Risk Premium Fund let you dip your toes into the cat bond market with modest minimums. Look, I'm not telling you to rush out and buy these assets. This isn't financial advice. But if you watch closely, you'll see the ultra-rich quietly shifting their bets from flashy markets to real, tangible assets that will matter when the system finally cracks. And speaking of cracks, there's something strange happening beneath the surface, something even the billionaires are whispering about but not quite putting into words. A looming risk tied to one of these assets that could shake the entire system to its core. But that's a story for another time. For now, keep your eyes open and your wits about you. The game is changing. The morning I first laid eyes on the farm in Cambridgeshire, it was shrouded in mist, the kind of fog that turns fields into ghostly silhouettes. I was there on behalf of a small investment group interested in farmland. Nothing fancy, just trying to understand what the fuss was about. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and freshly cut hay. It was early May, and the countryside was waking up in slow, deliberate bursts of green. The farm manager, a tall, wiry man named Tom Hargreaves, greeted me at the gate. He was wearing muddy boots, a faded green jacket, and a wool cap pulled low over his forehead. His hands were rough, cracked from years of tending soil and machinery, but his eyes sparkled with something almost conspiratorial, like he knew a secret no one else did. "Farmland's not just dirt and crops," he said, leading me past rows of barley swaying gently in the breeze. "It's an insurance policy, a real one." He smiled, showing a gap where a tooth had long since given up the fight against hard living. Tom explained how the soil here had been enriched by centuries of flooding from the nearby Great Ouse, leaving behind layers of dark, nutrient-rich silt, the kind of soil you dream about if you're a farmer or, apparently, a billionaire like William Gates. You can't just spread fertilizer and expect this kind of earth. It's made by nature, slow and patient. We walked toward a small pond near the edge of the fields, the water shimmering under a reluctant sun. "See that? That's the lifeblood. Water rights attached to this land aren't just a footnote in some dusty legal book. They're the real treasure." He paused, then added with a wink, "Without water, even the fanciest soil's just dirt." I asked about the price. Tom laughed. "You're not buying fields anymore. You're buying access to water, to climate resilience, to the future of food. The market's already priced that in, whether people admit it or not." As we stood there, a sleek Land Rover rolled up, and out stepped a sharply dressed woman in her early 30s. She wore a tailored navy trench coat, a silk scarf with subtle paisley patterns, and ankle boots polished to a mirror shine. Her auburn hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and her eyes scanned the horizon with the cool precision of a corporate executive, but with a hint of something more, maybe curiosity or calculation. She introduced herself as Eleanor Prescott, an investment strategist for Cascade Capital, the firm managing Gates's farmland portfolio. She wasn't the usual hard-nosed banker type. There was a grace about her, a dancer's poise combined with a sharp intellect. The kind of woman who could close a billion-pound deal before breakfast and still look like she'd just stepped out of a Vogue shoot. Eleanor explained over a thermos of strong black coffee in the farm's modest office how Cascade's strategy was laser-focused. We don't just buy land. We buy the right kind of land: soil, water, climate, logistics. It's about future-proofing. When global food systems falter, this land will feed millions. She pulled out a tablet, swiping through maps and climate models that showed shifting weather patterns, drought projections, and water table levels. Notice how our properties align with aquifers and rivers that recharge steadily even as others dry up. We're betting on resilience. I asked if this was a risky bet. She smiled. All investments carry risk, but farmland with guaranteed water access, it's as close to a sure thing as you can get in 2025. Before I left, Eleanor handed me a small, leather-bound booklet, a detailed overview of their holdings and investment philosophy. The cover was embossed with a discreet logo, a stylized leaf entwined with a water droplet. As I walked back to my car, the sun finally broke through the mist, casting golden light over those endless fields. It struck me how quietly powerful this world was, far removed from the noise of stock tickers and crypto hype, yet holding a grip on the future few dared to imagine. And just as I was about to start the engine, my phone buzzed with a cryptic message from an unknown number. Water isn't the only thing they're after. Watch London Bridge. The game's only just begun. The message on my phone lingered in my mind as I drove back through the winding lanes toward London. Water isn't the only thing they're after. Watch London Bridge. The game's only just begun. It felt like the start of one of those spy novels, but I knew better. This was real life, and the stakes were far higher than any fiction. Later that afternoon, I found myself standing on the south bank of the Thames, just a stone's throw from London Bridge. The river flowed grey and cold beneath the overcast sky, the city's hum muffled by the mist rolling in from the east. Tourists clustered near Borough Market, their chatter blending with the distant clatter of a double-decker bus. But my attention was drawn to a sleek, black water taxi gliding silently along the river, its windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. A few steps away, a group of men in tailored suits lingered near a cafe terrace, their expensive watches glinting beneath the soft drizzle. They weren't tourists, not by a long shot. One of them, a tall man with sharp features and piercing blue eyes, caught my gaze and gave a subtle nod, just enough to make me notice, not enough to be obvious. I knew he was part of something bigger. That evening, back in my flat near Shoreditch, I dug into the booklet Eleanor had given me. Cascade Capital wasn't just buying farmland and water rights. They were building an empire that stretched into infrastructure, technology, and something called urban water management. The idea was to control not just the water beneath the soil, but the entire system, from pipes beneath London streets to reservoirs miles upstream. Turns out, water rights in England are complicated. Unlike the American West, where ownership can be fiercely private, here water is managed by a patchwork of private companies and public trusts. But legal battles and regulatory loopholes meant that owning farmland with senior water rights could be just the first step in consolidating control over entire regions' water supplies. I started researching the companies involved and kept circling back to one name, Thames Aqua Holdings. Their offices were in Canary Wharf, a glass fortress of finance and power. The company's CEO, a woman named Victoria Langley, was a rising star in the industry. Tall and impeccably dressed, with sharp cheekbones and a voice like velvet, she'd made headlines for her aggressive acquisitions and unyielding negotiations with local councils. A quick search revealed that Thames Aqua Holdings had recently acquired several key water treatment plants and storage facilities near London Bridge. The timing struck me as more than coincidence. The water taxi I'd seen earlier was likely connected to them, perhaps ferrying executives or documents between these sites. I decided to reach out to a contact I'd made in the environmental sector, a journalist named Sam Patel who specialized in water rights and infrastructure. Over a late-night phone call, Sam confirmed my suspicions. "Victoria Langley's playing a long game," he said, his voice low with urgency. "It's not just about water for agriculture anymore. She's positioning Thames Aqua to control urban water distribution. If she succeeds, she'll have leverage over millions of Londoners, and that means influence over everything: housing developments, industry, even local governments." I asked if this was legal. Sam laughed bitterly. "Legal? Sort of. The system's a mess. Old laws, conflicting jurisdictions. It's like the Wild West, but with water pipes. Companies exploit loopholes all the time, and when water scarcity hits, prices spike. It's a slow squeeze." That's when I realized the full scope of what was happening. Farmland with water rights was just the beginning. The ultra-wealthy weren't just securing food production. They were quietly buying control over the water lifelines of entire communities. Later that week, I managed to secure a meeting with a former Thames Aqua engineer named Daniel Brooks. He was a wiry man in his 40s, with a worn leather jacket and a cautious gaze. Over coffee in a cramped cafe near London Bridge, he told me about the company's recent projects. "They're upgrading the infrastructure, sure," Daniel said, "but they're also installing smart meters that can remotely control water flow to households and businesses. It's efficient, but also a tool for control. Imagine if they decide to cut supply to push prices or enforce contracts." I shivered at the thought. Control over water wasn't just about money. It was power in its rawest form. As I left the cafe, the drizzle had turned to a steady rain, slicking the pavement with reflections of neon signs and umbrellas. The city felt both familiar and alien, a place where invisible battles were fought far from the public eye. And somewhere in the shadows, Eleanor Prescott's words echoed again. The game's only just begun. Just as I rounded the corner, my phone buzzed again. A new message popped up. "Watch the Thames. The next move is coming at midnight." Night had fallen over London, the city's skyline a jagged silhouette against the darkening sky. The Thames gleamed like a ribbon of liquid silver under the streetlights, its surface broken by the steady ripple of passing boats. I stood on the embankment near Tower Bridge, the cold air biting through my coat as I waited for midnight and whatever was supposed to happen next. The message, "Watch the Thames. The next move is coming at midnight," had stirred a mix of curiosity and unease in me. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew better than to dismiss it. In this game, silence and shadows spoke louder than words. At exactly midnight, a sleek black yacht slipped silently out from the docks, near St. Catherine Docks. Its polished hull reflected the city lights, and the hum of its engines was barely audible over the lapping water. The yacht moved with purpose, cutting through the fog that had rolled in thick and fast. I followed at a safe distance, weaving through narrow alleyways until I reached a vantage point on the opposite bank near Shad Thames. From there, I could see the yacht approach, a discreet floating platform moored beneath a cluster of warehouses. A group of figures emerged on deck, tall, lean silhouettes dressed in dark suits and trench coats, their faces hidden beneath hats and scarves. Among them, I recognized Eleanor Prescott. Her trademark silk scarf caught the faint light as she moved with the grace of a cat, commanding the scene without uttering a word. She was accompanied by two men I'd seen before, the sharp-eyed, blue-suited executive from earlier by London Bridge, and another, younger man with a neatly trimmed beard and wire-rimmed glasses. They gathered around a large crate, carefully unloading what appeared to be high-tech equipment. Black cases emblazoned with the logo of Thames Aqua Holdings. I strained to listen, catching fragments of their hushed conversation. We need to ensure the new sensors are operational by tomorrow. The data from the Central District will be critical, Eleanor said, her voice low but firm. The bearded man nodded. The software update is ready. Once installed, we can monitor and control flow rates remotely, even during peak demand. The blue-suited man added, "This gives us leverage. If any council tries to resist, we can tighten supply and force compliance." A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just corporate expansion. It was a calculated power play to control London's water supply in real time. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the darkness behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, to see a woman in a long trench coat and a knitted cap watching me intently. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and there was a flicker of urgency in her gaze. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. I hesitated, then said, "Neither should you. Who are you?" She glanced back toward the river where the yacht was finishing its unloading. "Name's Clara. I work for an independent watchdog group monitoring water rights and corporate overreach. We've been tracking Thames Aqua's moves for months. What you just saw, they're gearing up to control the city's water grid." I ran a hand through my hair. "Why haven't the authorities done anything?" Clara's lips tightened. "Because the laws are outdated, and the company's got politicians in their pockets. Plus, this kind of control is profitable, too profitable for them to stop." She reached into her coat and pulled out a small flash drive. "Take this. It's data we intercepted, documents, emails, plans, proof of their intentions and the risks to public access." As I pocketed the drive, a distant siren wailed, a reminder that the city never truly sleeps. Clara looked around nervously. "You need to be careful. Thames Aqua has eyes everywhere. If they find out you're digging, they'll come after you." Before I could ask more, she slipped into the shadows, vanishing as quickly as she'd appeared. I stood there alone, the weight of what I'd uncovered settling heavy on my shoulders. Control over water was no longer a distant threat. It was happening right now under London's very streets. And somewhere beneath the city's heartbeat, the game was accelerating. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed again. A new message lit up the screen. "Trust no one. The next target isn't water." The cryptic text, "Trust no one. The next target isn't water," felt like a punch to the gut. If controlling London's water supply was just the opening move, what could possibly come next? I pocketed my phone, the flash drive burning a hole in my jacket, and made my way back through the silent streets toward my flat. The city felt different now, as if the familiar London I'd known was peeling away to reveal something darker, more insidious, lurking beneath. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled into a high-stakes chess game where every piece was moving in silence, and I was just a pawn trying to keep up. The next morning I met up with Sam Patel, the journalist who had first tipped me off about the water rights conspiracy. We convened at a quiet cafe in Covent Garden, the kind of place where the scent of freshly ground coffee mingled with the hum of hushed conversations. I slid the flash drive across the table. "Clara gave me this last night. It's full of internal documents from Thames Aqua. They're not just after water. They're planning something bigger." Sam plugged the drive into his laptop and began scrolling through encrypted emails, contracts, and strategic plans. His brow furrowed deeper with every line. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a file labeled Project Ironclad. "It's a plan to leverage their infrastructure control to influence energy distribution networks connected to water treatment plants. By controlling water flow, they can indirectly manipulate electricity usage patterns in key districts." I blinked. "So, they're targeting energy next?" Sam nodded grimly. "Exactly. The water treatment plants consume huge amounts of power. If Thames Aqua controls when and where water flows, they can cause spikes or drops in energy demand, potentially destabilizing parts of the grid. I rubbed my temples. That sounds like blackmail on a national scale. Or worse, Sam's voice dropped. It's economic warfare disguised as infrastructure management. We dove deeper into the files, uncovering emails between Victoria Langley and executives at a shadowy investment firm called BlackRock Capital. Their discussions hinted at coordinated investments in both water and energy sectors across the UK and Europe. Then came the most chilling discovery, a series of intercepted messages referencing Operation Dry Run. The dates were set for the coming weeks, coinciding with planned maintenance on several major water and power facilities. Sam looked up, eyes wide. If they execute this, it could trigger widespread blackouts and water shortages, panic, chaos, and then a forced dependence on their control. I felt the weight of the situation pressing down. This wasn't just corporate greed. It was a blueprint for destabilizing society itself. Determined to get to the heart of the matter, I arranged a meeting with an expert in UK infrastructure security, Dr. Helen Carter, a former government advisor now working in private consultancy. She met me in a glass-walled office overlooking the Thames. "I've been tracking anomalies in the utility networks," Helen said, her sharp gaze unwavering. "There's been a surge in unauthorized access attempts to control systems, particularly linked to water and power grids. Whoever's behind this has deep pockets and inside knowledge." I asked if she believed Thames Aqua was involved. Helen hesitated, then said, "It fits their profile perfectly. They've been quietly acquiring assets and upgrading tech that could be exploited for coordinated disruption." I pressed, "How vulnerable is the system?" She grimaced. "More than you'd think. The infrastructure is aging and cybersecurity measures are inconsistent. A well-executed attack could indeed cripple multiple regions." As I left her office, the sky had darkened, clouds rolling in like a storm gathering on the horizon. The pieces were falling into place, a silent war for control over essentials we take for granted: water, energy, and soon, maybe more. Back at my flat, I plugged the flash drive into my computer, determined to find a way to stop what was coming. But as the files loaded, my screen flickered and went black. A message appeared in bold red letters. "You're playing a dangerous game. Step back or face the consequences." The city lights outside seemed to dim, as if London itself was holding its breath. And somewhere, deep in the shadows, the real players were making their next move. The warning on my screen was chilling. "You're playing a dangerous game. Step back or face the consequences." For a moment I sat frozen, the glow of my laptop illuminating the dark room. My heart hammered in my chest, not from fear but from the stark realization that I'd crossed a line. Whoever was behind this was watching, and they wanted me off their trail. I shut the computer and stared out the rain-streaked window at the restless city below. London felt like a cage now, its streets alive with secrets and shadows. But retreat wasn't an option. If Thames Aqua and their partners were planning to weaponize water and power, thousands, maybe millions, would suffer. I needed allies. The next morning I reached out to Clara. Her message had been a lifeline, and if anyone could help me navigate this, it was her. We met in a quiet bookshop nestled in a side street of Soho, the scent of old paper and coffee mingling in the air. She arrived wearing a tailored trench coat, her eyes sharp beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "You're being watched," she said without preamble, sliding a slim tablet across the table. "I've been monitoring unusual activity around Thames Aqua's servers. Someone's trying to lock down the network tighter, but I found a back door." I leaned in. "Can we use it?" She nodded. "If we're careful. But they'll know if we poke too hard." We spent hours poring over the data, tracing connections between Thames Aqua's water control systems and energy grids across the south of England. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about profit. It was about power, absolute control over the lifelines of modern life. As we worked, Clara told me about her past. A former cybersecurity analyst turned activist who had seen firsthand how corporations could bend the rules when given the chance. "It's like they're building a fortress," she said. "One pipeline, one pump, one power station at a time." Just as we were about to dig deeper, my phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the Old Bell Tavern, 9 p.m. Come alone." I glanced at Clara, who gave a tight nod. "Whatever happens, don't bring anyone." That night, the Old Bell Tavern was cloaked in shadows, its weathered brick facade glowing softly under the street lamp. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of oak and old ale, the low murmur of patrons blending with the crackle of a fireplace. I found a corner booth and waited, eyes scanning the room. At exactly 9 p.m., a man slipped through the door, a middle-aged figure with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone used to moving in dangerous circles. He introduced himself as Marcus Reed, a former Thames Aqua engineer turned whistleblower. His voice was gravelly but steady as he slid an envelope across the table. "You don't know everything," he said. "There's a faction within Thames Aqua working against Langley's plan. People who see where this is headed and want to stop it." I opened the envelope to find detailed blueprints of the water and energy control systems, along with internal memos revealing cracks in the company's leadership. Factions vying for control, some driven by profit, others by darker ambitions. Marcus leaned in. "They've been sabotaging each other behind the scenes. If we can expose the divisions and the risks, we might be able to rally public opinion and regulators before it's too late." I swallowed hard. This was bigger than I imagined, a corporate civil war with the city's survival hanging in the balance. Before I could ask more, Marcus's phone buzzed. He stiffened. "They know I'm here. You need to disappear for a while. Trust no one." As he slipped out into the night, I realized the truth. The deeper I dug, the more tangled the web became, and the closer I got, the more dangerous the game. Back on the streets, the rain had picked up, washing the city clean. Or so it seemed. But beneath the surface, the storm was just beginning. I barely had time to process Marcus's warning before my phone buzzed again. A text popped up. "They're coming for you. Leave London. Now." No signature, no explanation, just those 6 ominous words. Panic surged through me, but I forced it down. I wasn't about to run blindly, not when I was this close. Instead, I packed a small bag, just the essentials, and slipped out through the back entrance of my flat, avoiding the usual routes. The streets of Shoreditch felt unfamiliar under the veil of night, every shadow a potential threat. My destination was a small village about 50 miles north, Ashcombe, nestled in the rolling hills of the Cotswolds. It was the kind of place where the biggest excitement was a village fete or a new batch of scones at the tea shop. Perfect for laying low. I arrived just before dawn, the mist curling over the fields like a secret kept by the earth itself. Ashcombe's narrow lanes were silent, save for the distant crowing of roosters and the soft rustle of leaves. I checked into a modest bed and breakfast run by a kindly older couple, the sort who'd never dream of locking their doors. The room was small but cozy, with floral wallpaper and a window overlooking a garden bursting with wildflowers. As I settled in, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Maybe paranoia, maybe reality. Either way, I needed allies and answers. The next morning, I visited the local library, a quaint stone building with shelves groaning under the weight of history. I hoped to find anything that could shed light on Thames Aqua's reach beyond London. That's when I met Sophie Miller, the village librarian. A slender woman in her late 30s with chestnut hair pulled into a loose bun and glasses perched on her nose. Her dress was simple but elegant, a soft blue cotton that hinted at a quiet confidence. She carried herself with the grace of someone who knew her community inside out. We struck up a conversation over a stack of local history books. "I've heard whispers," Sophie said cautiously, lowering her voice, "about corporate interests creeping into rural areas, buying up land, controlling water supplies. There's talk of new pipelines and reservoirs, projects shrouded in secrecy." Her eyes flicked toward the window. "Ashcombe's not immune. There's been unusual activity near the old mill. Heavy machinery late at night, surveyors mapping the fields." She paused, then added, "Some villagers are worried. Others don't know what to think. But if Thames Aqua's involved, it's bad news." I shared what I knew about the company's plans and the growing threat to water and energy security. Sophie listened intently, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. "I might know someone who can help," she said finally. "A local farmer named Daniel Harper. He's been fighting off developers trying to seize water rights for years. Doesn't trust big corporations one bit." That afternoon, Sophie drove me out to Daniel's farm, a sprawling patchwork of golden wheat and green pastures bordered by ancient hedgerows. Daniel was a rugged man in his 50s, with weather-beaten skin, calloused hands, and eyes sharp as a hawk's. He wore worn jeans and a flannel shirt, boots caked in mud, and a leather satchel slung over one shoulder. He greeted us with a wary nod but warmed as I explained the situation. "They're after the water beneath this land," Daniel said, gesturing to the rolling fields. "If they get control, it won't just be farmers who suffer. The whole village depends on these wells." He led me to an old pump house, its brick walls stained with time. "They've been sending surveyors, trying to map the aquifers. If Thames Aqua gets their hands on this, they'll have a stranglehold on the countryside." Daniel's voice was steady but fierce. "We need to fight back, but it's not just about land or water, it's about keeping our way of life." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the fields, I realized the battle wasn't just in London. It was spreading, creeping into places like Ashcombe, where the stakes were just as high. And with every passing day, the web tightened. That night, as I lay in the quiet room, my phone buzzed again. A new message appeared. "You're closer than you think. But some truths are buried deep." The message, "You're closer than you think. But some truths are buried deep," echoed in my mind as dawn broke over Ashcombe. It felt like a warning and a challenge wrapped into one, teasing at secrets hidden beneath the surface. Secrets that could change everything. I couldn't shake the feeling that the next clue lay not in the sprawling fields or corporate boardrooms, but underground, where water, history, and power intertwined. That afternoon, with Daniel and Sophie by my side, I ventured to the old mill Sophie had mentioned, the one surrounded by whispers and late-night machinery. The building was a relic from another era, weathered stone walls draped in ivy, broken windows patched with wooden boards, and a rusted water wheel frozen in time. We slipped inside through a side door, the air thick with dust and the faint scent of damp wood. Sunlight filtered through cracks, casting eerie patterns on the floor. The silence was broken only by the distant drip of water, echoing somewhere deep below. Daniel led us to a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. "The mill's old water channels run deep beneath the village," he explained. "These tunnels were used centuries ago to power the mill, but they also connect to natural aquifers beneath Ashcombe." With only a flashlight to guide us, we descended into the shadows. The walls were cold and slick with moisture, the air heavy and still. Every step echoed ominously, and my pulse quickened, After what felt like an eternity, we reached a cavernous chamber, a hidden reservoir carved into the bedrock, its surface shimmering in the flashlight's beam. Pipes and valves, long corroded, jutted from the walls like ancient bones. Sophie pulled out a tablet, overlaying old maps with recent satellite images. "This reservoir feeds the village wells," she said softly. "If Thames Aqua gains control here, they could cut off water to Ashcombe entirely." Daniel knelt by the water's edge, tracing a faded inscription carved into the stone. "Guardians of the lifeblood." He looked up, eyes fierce. "This place has been protected for generations. Our ancestors knew water was worth fighting for." Suddenly, a faint rumble shook the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling, and distant footsteps echoed above. We froze. "Someone's coming," I whispered. We scrambled back up the stairs, hearts pounding, and burst into the daylight just as a convoy of black SUVs rolled into the mill's courtyard. Men in dark suits poured out, speaking sharply into earpieces, surveying the area with cold precision. I clenched my fists. Thames Aqua's reach wasn't just corporate, it was militarized. That night, back at the B&B, I reviewed the flash drive again, searching for anything about the mill or Ashcombe's water network. Buried in encrypted files, I found mention of a covert project codenamed Lifeblood, a plan to integrate rural reservoirs into a centralized control system, effectively placing entire regions' water supplies under corporate command. The implications hit me hard. This wasn't just about business. It was about control, coercion, and survival. As I stared out at the misty fields beyond my window, a shadow flickered across the wall behind me. I spun around, heart racing, only to find the door ajar. A folded note slipped under the frame. I unfolded it with trembling hands. In neat handwriting, the words read, "Trust no one. The past holds the key." The room seemed to close in around me as the weight of that message sank in. The answers I sought were buried deep, in history, in hidden places, and in the tangled web of power stretching across England. And time was running out. The cryptic note, "Trust no one. The past holds the key," seemed to pulse with urgency in my hands. If the answers lay buried in history, then I needed to dig deeper than any corporate report or modern map. I needed to uncover the stories, the secrets, and the alliances that had shaped Ashcombe and its precious water long before Thames Aqua appeared on the scene. The next morning, Sophie took me to the village archives, a small stone cottage nestled beside the church. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of parchment and wood polish. Rows of dusty ledgers, yellowed maps, and brittle letters filled the shelves. The librarian, an elderly man named Arthur, greeted us with a nod and a knowing smile. Sophie explained our quest, and Arthur's eyes sparkled. "Many here believe the water beneath Ashcombe is sacred," he said, pulling out a fragile leather-bound journal. This belonged to Jonathan Hartwell, a miller and local historian from the 1800s. He wrote extensively about the Lifeblood Springs, hidden aquifers said to have sustained the village through droughts and wars. We pored over Hartwell's entries, his careful script weaving tales of secret water rights battles, ancient pacts between landowners, and mysterious disappearances linked to attempts at controlling the springs. One passage caught my eye. "The guardians of the water have always stood vigilant. Should greed threaten the well, the past will rise to protect what is sacred." Intrigued, I asked Arthur about the Guardians. He hesitated before revealing a local legend, a covert group of villagers who, for centuries, had secretly protected the water sources from exploitation, using knowledge passed down through generations. Sophie found a faded map tucked in the back of the journal, marked with symbols and cryptic notes pointing to hidden wells and underground passages beneath the village. Fueled by this discovery, Daniel and I set out to explore the marked locations. Armed with flashlights and Hartwell's map, we navigated a maze of narrow tunnels, forgotten wells, and ancient cisterns. The air was thick with history, the walls whispering stories of resilience and resistance. At the heart of the labyrinth, we found a concealed chamber, stone walls etched with symbols matching those in the journal. In the center stood an old wooden chest, locked but surprisingly intact. Using a rusted key Daniel had found earlier on the farm, we opened it to reveal a collection of documents. Handwritten deeds, water rights contracts dating back centuries, and a leather-bound ledger detailing agreements between local families to safeguard the water. Among the papers was a letter addressed to future guardians, warning of outsiders seeking to seize control and urging vigilance. As I read aloud, a sudden noise echoed through the tunnels, a shuffling footstep, distant but unmistakable. We exchanged tense glances. The past had indeed risen, but so had the shadows pursuing us. Back above ground, the village felt both familiar and fragile, a place where ancient secrets clashed with modern power plays. That evening, I sat by the fire in the B&B, piecing together the fragments. The battle for Ashcombe's water was a continuation of a centuries-old struggle, a fight between guardians and usurpers. But one question gnawed at me. Who among us could be trusted to stand with the guardians? And who might be working against us, from within? As the fire flickered, my phone buzzed once more. This time, a single word appeared on the screen. Tomorrow. The word tomorrow flashed on my phone like a countdown, a silent drumbeat echoing through the quiet of the night. Whatever was coming, it was close, too close to ignore. I stared at the screen, the flickering firelight casting long shadows across the room, and felt the weight of every choice I'd made crash down on me. Ashcombe was no longer just a quiet village tucked away in the Cotswolds. It was the front line of a battle for the very essentials of life: water, power, survival. And now I was right in the middle of it. I spent the rest of the night pacing, reviewing everything: the farmland, the water rights, the corporate machinations, the ancient guardians, and the mysterious factions within Thames Aqua. Each thread wove into a larger tapestry of greed, secrecy, and resistance. But amid all the chaos, one truth stood clear. The people fighting to protect what was theirs weren't just villagers. They were the last line between control and collapse. At dawn, I met Daniel and Sophie outside the village church, its old stone walls bathed in the soft morning light. They looked as determined as I felt, ready to face whatever storm was coming. "We need to warn the village," Daniel said, voice steady. "If Thames Aqua makes their move tomorrow, it won't just be Ashcombe at risk. Nearby communities will feel it too." Sophie nodded. "We have to rally everyone. The Guardian's legacy isn't just history. It's a call to action." Word spread quickly through Ashcombe. Farmers, shopkeepers, families, all gathering in the village square, sharing stories and fears, but also hope. The ancient pact was alive again, binding strangers into allies. As evening fell, a low rumble shook the ground. Lights flickered across the village as Thames Aqua's convoy rolled in, heavy machinery and technicians ready to assert control. But this time they faced more than empty fields and silent wells. They met a community awakened, united by history, armed with knowledge and willing to fight. Confrontations flared, voices rose, but amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. A faction within Thames Aqua, disillusioned by Langley's ruthless plans, stepped forward. Led by Marcus Reed, the whistleblower, they brokered a tense ceasefire. The battle lines blurred, revealing fractures within the corporation and a chance for change. As the dust settled beneath the stars, I stood with Daniel and Sophie, watching the river that had sustained this land for centuries flow steady and free. But the victory felt fragile, like a single candle flickering against a gathering storm. and somewhere beyond Ashcombe, in the heart of London and across distant boardrooms, the true game was far from over. Because controlling water and power was just the beginning. The question remained, who would control the future? And that future was coming. Fast. The end. For now.